Tomorrow is my birthday. I'm going to be 40 years old. It only seems like just the other day I was 29 and joining Urban Saints, but now I've been in this role for 10 and a half years. It reminds me of a story that Steve Chalke tells when he once went to interview Billy Graham for a Songs of Praise special. And near the end of the interview, Steve turned to Billy and said, "Billy, when you look back on the whole of your life, what's one of the big life lessons that you've learned?" And Billy said this, that time goes fast. Time goes really quickly. And it does, doesn't it? We all have time in common. It's the great leveler. You can't stretch it, you can't make it longer, as much as you might like it. The 36-hour day is never going to come. And we all live by two critical dates. There's the date that we were born. For me, the 6th of October, 1970. But then there's this other date, this date that we don't know about, the date when we die. And hopefully for all of us, that date is a long way away. But the question is, how will we live our lives between those two dates? What will our lives look like? How do we get the most out of this life? There was a guy once called Irenaeus from many hundreds of years ago, and he said that the glory of God is man fully alive, and the vision of God is the life of man. What Irenaeus is saying is that God wants us to be fully alive, to thrive, to be fulfilled, to get to the end of our lives and know that we've lived life in all its fullness and that we've encouraged others to do the same. The last letter that Paul ever writes is 2 Timothy, or one of the last letters at least. And he writes it from his prison cell to his close friend and mentee, Timothy. Paul knows that even though he's been in prison many times before, this time, this is it. The mad Emperor Nero has arrested him, imprisoned him, and he's pretty sure that now he's going to be executed. And tradition tells us that it was perhaps just a few months later when Paul was finally beheaded. And so 2 Timothy is an important letter because it's a letter written by a man who knows he's reaching the end of his life and he wants to pass something on to his friend. And these are the words that he says in 2 Timothy 4, verse 7 and 8, as he reflects back on his life. "I have fought the good fight, I've finished the race, and I've remained faithful. And now the prize awaits me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on the day of his return. And the prize is not just for me, but for all who eagerly look forward to his appearing. I've fought the good fight. I've finished the race." I never forget the first time I heard a guy called Alex Buchanan speak. Alex was in his 60s at the time, and he talked about his passion to enter heaven breathlessly. He didn't want to kind of crawl into heaven, but he wanted to break the tape with a kind of cry of, "I've done it." That's what Paul's talking about in this passage. Despite the fact that he knew that he'd made mistakes and in his past done some terrible things, he ultimately knew that he had lived his life well. That's what God wants for us, that we run our race well, that we know our time on earth is limited, but we live life in all its fullness. The Bible reminds us to this end that we need to value the gift of time. I don't know if you used to sing an old chorus back in your days at Sunday school, "This is the day that the Lord has made, that the Lord has made." I won't scare you with my singing. It's based on Psalm 118, verse 24. The problem is, for many of us, it's just become a cheesy old chorus rather than a life-changing truth. But a life-changing truth is what it is. You see, the fact that you got up this morning, that you have breath in your body, life in your body, is a gift from God. Time is a gift from God. And if you're alive today, then there's something you can do for God. God has given us this time, this moment. which is why the Bible also tells us to use our time wisely. Paul also writes in Ephesians 5, verse 15 to 16, "Be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days." Friends, God wants us to run the race of life well, to live an effective, God-honoring life. How do we make sure that we don't endure life, but that we enjoy it? How do we get to that place where we enter heaven breathlessly? How do we stay the course and become all that God created us to be? How do we make sure that our work for God doesn't kill the work of God in our lives? How do we make sure that we're not so caught up in this busy culture that we don't end up becoming bitter? How do you keep on keeping on reaching this generation? In the next few months, this is what we're going to look at: the challenge of finishing well as a leader, the joy of entering heaven breathlessly. What does that look like? How does it relate to my work with children and young people? How can I be bold to say to a busy, workaholic culture, that is not the way I'm going to play? But why not today just take some time out to say thank you to God for the gift of time, for the gift of your life, and ask Him how you can wisely steward that gift today in this moment, and be an inspiration to the young people and children you work with to do the same. Until next time, God bless.